Okay, welcome to the 39th episode of an Evolving Man podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be speaking to Bill Kauth. Bill is the co-founder of the Mankind Project, MKP, and the New Warrior Training Adventure, NWTA. The NWTA has now served over 75,000 men and has 47 centers in 12 countries around the world. In 1992, St. Martin's Press published his book, A Circle of Men, the original manual for men's support groups, and it was reissued in 2015. As a social inventor over the last 2 decades, Bill has also co-founded the Inner King Training and in 1995 launched the Warrior Monk Training Retreat. In his role as visionary at large with the MKP, Bill studies the state of the world, seeing the need for local tribes and fraternal lodges. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
Real pleasure to have you here. I first came across the Mankind Project. I think it was 2006. Someone said to me, "Oh, you have to do this training," and I didn't do it at the time. And then 10 years later, I said to my wife one time, Sunday night, just before going to bed, I said, "Oh, next week's the Mankind Project training in Scotland." And she says, "Oh, you've got to go and do it." And I said, No, I didn't say I'm going to do it. I said, "It's happening next week." She says, "No, you really should go and do it." And so I did. And the rest is history. So thank you. I really appreciate you founding and producing this.
Yeah.
So I'd love you to share a bit of your journey, Bill. You know, what drew you into creating the Mankind Project, the New Warrior Training Adventure? What was the inspiration there?
I was a psychotherapist in in the 80s, and I was kind of an entrepreneurial guy, so I'd create these little seminars, and I could see the pain that men were in. It was also in the 80s. That was the time when the feminist movement was powerful, and I actually got invited to I identified as a feminist therapist because it had to do with authenticity and real relationships with your client, and not holding too much professional distance, so to speak. So I like that. It kind of spoke to me. So I got invited to the biannual Wisconsin Feminist Therapist Association gathering, and I accepted it. And someplace in the middle of the second day, I was in the lobby, and because I had done a great deal of gestalt work, a lot of emotional work, a lot of inner opening, just because I was thrilled by that. I was in graduate school, but my real work was at a kind of a local Milwaukee, Wisconsin counterpoint to Esalen,
Yeah.
So lots of gestalt work. So my inner process of observing evolved people was pretty high. So I'm standing in the middle of the lobby, and honestly, out of 125 feminist therapists, I think I was the only guy there, the only man. And I saw these unbelievably highly evolved beings, and I went, "Oh my, geez, what? This is amazing!" And then suddenly it was like, "And damn it, somebody's got to do something for the men." And that finger pointing out kind of turned her on, and I went, "Oh shit, not me! Oh no!" And I tried to push it away. It was like a call from the divine or something. But I took it in, and I was like a crazy man from then on. I just couldn't do anything else except work on this project of doing something for men. It was that abstract. And I had a couple of terrific friends. One was a guy named Ron Herring, who was a university professor who had done literally hundreds and hundreds of hours of personal growth work, and he had 5 sons. And so I said, "Ron, we got to do something for the men." He went, "Okay, boy, I don't know what you're up to, Bill, but I got 5 sons, I'm in." And then there's another guy that had come into my life recently, like 3-4 years before that, and we had done a great deal of emotional cathartic work. There was a training in the Milwaukee area. So I had seen his heart. I had seen his ferocity. I had seen his grief. I had seen his sadness. There was just something intuitively amazing about this guy. His name was Rich Tosi. And I said to him, "Tosi, we got to do something for the men. I'd like to invite you to this project." And he honestly, he worked for General Motors. He was an executive. He wore a suit every day. he was also a former Marine Corps guy. He lived, he worked, he was in the United States Marine Corps for 10 years. He actually went to Vietnam. And I was kind of a hippie therapist, and it was like, it couldn't have been more different. But somehow I convinced him to go to a training, because we kind of checked out everything that was going on during that time. We'd been to Robert Bly, we knew that stuff, but there was a training out in California called Men, Sex, and Power, which was like the potent men's training at the time. So we got to go find out what that's up to, because we don't want to be recreating the wheel. So we did, and he had an amazing emotional breakthrough right there. He realized that he honestly needed to do the work, and he committed in. He said, "Okay, Bill." And so the three of us then met in '84, kind of late in '84, for I don't know, 4 or 5 months, and each of us had a little genius, and none of the three of us could have done this alone. But the three of us somehow, without any hierarchy, we worked as absolute peers from the very beginning. And we threaded this training together, starting from the greeting, which was, you've been there, you know the greeting's a little fierce. That came from Tosi. To some of the more sophisticated stuff, like the transpersonal mission, all that kind of came from Ron and me. Anyway, we launched in January of '85, and boy, that's 37 years ago. I know. And we knew right away it was brilliant, because the men's just hearts popped open. And again, you've been there, so you know what happens. It's a container that's so safe that men can really, really, really open their hearts, often for the first time in their lives, and they get to see really close up other men's pain and grief and joy, and it's a joyous experience. It just is. So therefore, it's continued for 37 years, pretty much in the same form, although there's been so many just brilliant creative men that have added in, smoothed and refined that process. So that's where we are today.
Thank you. Yeah, I can vouch for it being a very powerful experience. So, yeah, I can. Yeah, wow. So I guess somewhere I'd love to explore, because I know your second book is about community. What you mentioned there about Rich, Ron, and yourself, kind of, you couldn't have done it alone. Love, because for me, I feel, I guess, there's a lot of struggles in the world at the moment, and a lot of us feel we can't do it on our own. So I'd love you to speak a bit about community and that work you're now doing.
Wow. Yeah, it's been an enormous challenge. I think, that book that you brought up, that's about, putting together your own men's support group. And that book has been selling actually really well it was published in '92 originally, and it still sells, several dozen copies a month. So there's a hunger for community all over the world. And you know this too, like damn near everything in our culture mitigates against community. Sometimes I wonder if it's intentional, but part of it is just the advancement of technology. Boy, and advertising, to the least valuable part of us, has created an enormous loneliness. There was even a book a couple of years back called Lost Connections, about depression, and it's as high as it's ever been. People are so lonely. And so I've taken on this task. My wife and I, kind of found that was a driving energy when we met. We met back in '05. We met at Burning Man too, which is a kind of a world-class experiment in community, in which you there's no commerce there at all. You don't buy or sell anything. So it's really a living the giveaway. It's about, bringing a gift, bringing your gift, the gift of who you are. So we've been experimenting with building community, and wrote that book called We Need Each Other, which I pulled from, that's a line I pulled from Charles Eisenstein, who's been quite the amazing mentor. Boy, he just wrote a brand new book. I just ordered a case of them, called Coronation. And it's his writing over the last couple of years about what's been going on around the planet with the whole COVID drama. Anyway, Charles was quite the mentor for us. And honestly, we traveled the world teaching about community and how to do it. And it's all in the book, kind of laid out in detail. And I gotta say, the level of success has been dismal. It's just, seriously, I mean, I've given an enormous amount of my life energy into helping people find and, know how to commute, some motivation and details about how to, how to create community, from learning how to invite somebody to lunch all the way to a transpersonal conflict resolution process, so it's like I've done it all. And as I look out, it's just not happening. It's like the system has so invaded people's inner process that community is very, very difficult. It's a horrible message that I have to bring, but that is my experience. I still support anybody in doing anything they can to figure out how to be with other people consistently in a good, solid, growthful way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've heard a similar thing. One of the monks I lived with in community was telling me a story that they did a study in the 70s in the UK, and they found there was a community which was most together and the community which most disparate. And then they did the same study 30 years later, and they found this community which was most disparate was now the community which was the most together 30 years later. So it shows that,
oh geez,
everything's kind of, people have become more insular. It's like less community minded than the 30 years before. So it's just, it's kind of fascinating that, and I imagine even more over the last couple of years with COVID, that people are even more so.
I don't think it was, but it's almost as if it were carefully designed to tear people apart, to demand that you stay apart, to demand that you cover your faces, all the details that might have led to community. So that's really exacerbated the loneliness.
But I'd love you to share the positive of what is the vision, what really helps build community, what are the steps that we need to do?
Oh boy, that's such a big one.
Is it?
And
Okay.
honestly, but it starts with inviting somebody to have a cup of coffee. That sounds almost, just irrelevant and silly, but it's been amazing as we've gone around and helped people as best as we could. Just inviting them to invite one other person to get together to have coffee. Geez, but that's where it starts. And if people don't have the volition to do that, it's so not going to happen. So then we even invite them, well, find somebody that you trust that can invite somebody else. Honestly, building community requires a very high intention and a certain skill set, which is why I'm, proud of MKP, because we teach a lot of those skills. And not only in kind of an academic way, but in the pragmatic way, in the integration groups, which, by the way, is one of the things I am really proud of around the whole thing. We've got 10,000 men that sit in group every single week. Wow. There's like 1,000 or so groups someplace on the planet where men gather up and sit and open their hearts to each other every week. 10,000 men. I love that. That just feels so right. Like, oh my God, I've done something way right there. And they are honestly building community. And there's a lot of work. An awful lot of them get stuck too doing guts work, and they don't open to a more social, inclusive process. So I guess I'm saying that to the men that might be, working this. Don't get stuck in that protocol. Move on. Be creative. Open your group up to new possibilities.
Yeah, I think I love that about your book, actually, talking about play. So one of the things I've done men's retreats, and men at the beginning are quite serious. So I get them to go and do this thing, which comes from John Young's The Eight Shields. It's like hide and seek. And they're at the beginning, they're like this. Within 5 minutes, they were running, rolling around. They're like, oh yeah, great. That was amazing. So I love that chapter in the book about opening up to play in games.
Thank you for noticing it. It's so important. And that same thing, that playful, goofy part of us, if there's a safe place, we will step into it. I've said this for years. We men are good, loving, open-hearted, beautiful creatures. If only there was a place where it was safe enough for us to open our hearts with each other, which is what the New Warrior training is all about, of course.
So I'm hearing, beginning step, invite someone you know for a cup of coffee. That's how it begins. And I think through doing the training with you, that's something I did do a few years ago. And I invited a friend, and that it's like I always struggled with friendships, and now I have a couple of close friends who are from the Mankind Project and live locally, and we go for walks. And that started with me just messaging him. You fancy going for a walk?
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Well, I have a walk with a new friend today. He's my doctor,
Right.
a medical doctor, and I was in getting my biannual physical, and something I noticed that he wasn't. I had my mask under my nose, it was during that time, and I noticed. And I started just talking openly about him and with him about this and my kind of disbelief in that whole drama. And next thing I know, he's right with me. So we've become friends now. We walk every Wednesday. We take a little walk in the park. Yeah. It sounds like such a simple thing, but just reaching out and taking a walk and then repeat it the next week. Next thing you know, you got a friend. So
yeah. Thank you. Okay. So I think another thing I would love to talk about, which is quite prominent in the book, is this idea of mission and purpose, and especially for men, because we kind of first connected a little bit on the Ron Herring Award.
Yes. Mission.
Which is about mission with the Mankind Project, and therefore you talk about that in your book, and I see that in my life often I haven't had really a mission. I've kind of just been pottering along, and I think the Mankind Project's really helped me connect in with a mission. Right, what am I here to do?
Yep.
So
I read that in as I was studying your website, I was impressed with how that mission came into your life. Once you'd done a ton of inner work, there was just a time where you kind of knew what you needed to do to touch the world. And I know these interviews are part of that. So, and that's why you won the Ron Herring Mission in the World Award this year. You so deserve it. It was really beautiful. Glad I got to bless you on that.
Thank you. So what would you say for a man or a woman who's, asking, well, what's mission? What is purpose? And how do I find that?
Oh, geez. Yeah, just asking the question, just holding that in your heart, what's mine to do? It'll get delivered. Jeez. Like I shared my story, how I just, my curiosity was up, and I followed my bliss. That's one of the things that, Joseph Campbell said many years ago. I just bought this little thing.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, it's over on the coast, a little piece of driftwood, but it says "Follow your bliss," and that's a quote from Joseph Campbell, right, from way back. And I translate bliss as joy, and joy. I got this from a guy named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He wrote a book called Flow many years ago, 30, 40 years ago. And he defined joy as the experience of becoming a slightly more complex being. So what that means is that I might taste something I've never tasted before. And I just at some micro level, I become a slightly more complex being, having had that experience. And that's or I see a sunset or a sunrise that I haven't ever seen before. And you never see the same one twice, they're always so different. Or I touch, in a way, or, sexuality is joyous because it's often so different, such a unique experience, so complex. So joy is the experience of becoming a slightly more complex being. So those of us that follow our bliss, we live into our joy, basically. We search out things that will open us and expand the essence of who we are. And on a metaphysical level, if you think of God as being the all that is, that's constantly expanding, if I put my attention and intention on expanding. So God is expanding. So it's almost like a divine reward. It just feels so good when we're in joy. I took a book along. I took a book along over to the coast this weekend, and oh man, every chapter had several new memes. And I rather insisted. That's why I like Charles Eisenstein's stuff so much. Is he's such a fresh thinker that there's new memes almost every page, and that means that as I'm reading his stuff, I'm expanding. There's a joy. I'm expanding. I'm learning. I'm growing. So so I say follow your bliss, and if we can do that interpersonally. Yeah, I've got another friend. I was with him yesterday, and man, we just sit and talk for an hour, maybe 2 hours every single week. And he's a guy he's got this kind of open heart and sort of a cognitive brilliance. He's got a brilliant memory, and we hit joy just in our conversation every single week. And by the time we get in hug, we just hug and hug and hug because there's such a precious bond there, because we share joy with each other. Yeah. So I guess in terms of building community, find those people that you grow with, that you experience joy with, and just set it up so that you're with them regularly. Yeah, let's the four of us. Let's meet every Thursday morning for breakfast. Those are the kind of invitations that build community. One piece at a time.
And I like that's simple, because sometimes I think I can see that I can create things which are complex, and actually just meeting once a week to have breakfast with 4 friends.
Yeah.
To be in joy. That's nice and easy. I can do that.
Yeah, it's not that big of a complicated invitation either. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
One after a couple months, so I said, can I bring my friend Bob? Yeah. Okay. Now we got 5 in the group. Cool.
Yeah. Great idea. I'll have a reflect if I can do that. I say when I do that.
Yes.
So some of the other kind of questions I mentioned before we started recording, Bill, that in my men's circle, I've got a few men who are looking at setting up their own groups. And one recently was mentioning that he had some fear about setting it up. And I said, oh yeah, me too. I said, I'm usually terrified before I do my podcast or before my men's circle. And he's like, oh, okay. So it's normal. I'm like, well, yeah. So I'd love you to speak a little bit about, if there is someone out there. One, I guess, is the importance of, having a circle, whether that's women or men. And then what you feel are the steps for us to set something up.
Well, and we've talked about inviting people, but the steps are all, you've got that copy of my book. I deliberately wrote that down. It's going to be 30 years ago. There's some real simple skills that are useful. Basic communication skills are useful, and some basic structure. So I'm not sure what else you want beyond that.
Yeah. I guess the invitation for men who are interested, who are doing that, is to get the book and to kind of go through that, to have the structure. Because I think one of the things I noticed, which I've kind of really taken from it, is this idea of ritual. And I know Robert Moore talks about that, about we live so much in the profane and we need to move more into the sacred. And I love what you were sharing there about having some form of ritual in either a group or your life.
Just checking in is a ritual that just simply works. It's very pragmatic. It gives everybody a little update on what's been going on for everybody over the last week. It's such a simple. I heard a story about a warrior brother that he was crossing state lines and he had some marijuana. This was back when it was illegal, and he got busted and he got stuck in jail for several months. And what he did with the guys that he was in jail with is he started running little I groups. He started running groups. He'd circle them up and have them check in. Next thing you know, they were all having a good time being in jail together. So that's the potency of these simple rituals. There's a need for lodge. A lot of our work and some of the new things I believe we need are rooted in the old fraternal groups from 150 years ago. That's like the Elks and the Moose and the Odd Fellows and the Masons and so forth. They gathered, basically, they sprang out of a need, which was that during that era, a lot of the men were leaving the farms and they were going into factories and mines and so forth, and they'd get killed. That's part of the danger of those things that happened. And their families were left alone. So the men were savvy enough to gather together and build a fraternal organization, which was kind of like an insurance for them and their families. And if they got harmed in any way, the lodge, they were all called lodges, would take care of the widow and the kids and put the kids through college and do that. And that was literally a spontaneous happening of creative people back during that time. And then as we got more and more wealthy, it wasn't needed anymore. And like in this country, Social Security came on, and the function of the lodges kind of went away, and they just became philanthropic groups and began to wane, began to go away, which again is a loss of community, as that happened. So we tried to recreate that here by creating an elders lodge, and it's got structure. We have a leadership. I'm kind of encouraging people here. Like, we just made it up. It was like the structure of the leadership was, 3 men would step up every quarter, and they would be a troika. 3 men are the leaders, and they'd figure out what to do for each meeting every month. And we always start by little prayer that kind of spun off of Mankind Project, which was inviting in, honoring the 4 directions or the 7 directions, and honoring the ancestors, just simple stuff like that. But that was kind of a little sacred thing that everybody liked, and we do it every week, and somebody different would call in the different directions. Very sweet. And then at the end, we'd release them again, just simple ritual. We'd release the directions and the ancestors, and circle up and put our arms around each other and check out with 1 word. It was just the sweetest, simple ritual. But God, it felt so good, and you just feel the men's hearts open, every single meeting. So there's a example of ritual and how that might play.
Yeah, thank you. I kind of, as you're speaking, kind of ties in something you're talking about in your book, and also Robert Bly talks about this idea of initiation, that almost as the men went off to the factories rather than being at home or on the land, with the initiation went. Would you like to speak a bit about that how important initiation is and how lacking it is now? It almost sounds like, from what you're saying in reading your book, that the fraternities had almost disappeared, and the Mankind Project was the first new one for a long time.
Yes. Yeah, I'm actually proud of that too, that the need was there, and somehow we were called to fill it, and so it spread around the world. Back when the families were on the farms, the boys learned how to be men by simply being with dad every day, all day. Learned how to take care of the animals, and how to take care of the land, and how to plant and harvest. They just learned what men did by just modeling what dad did and doing it themselves. And as dad then disappeared, as the factories and minds, it made it a little harder, or it made it almost impossible for them to model off of him, except for sometimes like on the weekends. So then there came the need for, you know, some more formal initiation for the boys. Yeah, and that has been a terrible struggle. I remember we used to talk about, you know, how do you know when you're a man? Is it when you get your driver's license, or is it when you have, you know, sex with a woman or a girl for the first time? Is that when you're a man, or is it when you get married, or, you know, or when you get your first job? We just didn't know, which I think is part of why the Mankind Project is spread around the world, because we simply were brassy enough to just confer manhood. You know, you are a warrior, you're a man, we see you. Again, it just seems so simple, but just to actually have a structure to do it. You know, I've watched men in their 60s and 70s, you know, get that sacred talisman and get that blessing, and honestly feel in their hearts like, oh geez, now I'm finally a man. It's just, I mean, again, it sounds so silly, but there's ritual again, you know, sacred ritual that you know, somebody has brought together to do that blessing that we're so hungry for.
Mm, mm, mm. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I can see that with, say, in my community, like the young boys, you
Mm-hmm.
know, recently I work as a scout leader, and one of the young boys was attacked on the streets by a 13-year-old, and he was 16, and he was in hospital. And I just thought, you know, often what I see I can do is I can blame, well, it's their parents or that. And actually, sometimes what I'm learning to do is go, actually, it's me as an older man, me
Hmm.
getting other men together, that it's not necessarily their fault that they're doing that. It's that the men aren't there. They're just left on the streets.
Yep. Yeah, I guess that's why gangs form, is that they have no initiation. So they create their own initiation by gathering up and doing outrageous things that seems masculine.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Mm,
And
yeah.
I love what you said as well about being in the fields. It reminds me of Robert Bly and Iron John talking about that often a boy will learn from men. It's almost like reverse osmosis. They just have to be in their presence. And it's
Mm,
like a transfusion. They
yeah.
learn masculinity that way. And I remember when I did my Mankind weekend, you know, obviously I'd spent time in a monastery, so we were all male, but there was just say 5 or 10 of us. And that weekend, I think there were 100 men in one room.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, it felt so powerful. It was like, wow, I don't think I've ever been in a room just men,
Yeah.
benevolent men, and a lot of tears. I think I wept for a few days
Yeah.
during my weekend. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Just to know that other men feel so deeply allows us to allow allow those feelings to come through that for some of us have been bottled up for decades.
Mm,
Mm.
mm, yeah, yeah. I Another thing I kind of read in your book last night, and I feel this is where my part of my mission is going. I'm starting, I haven't really told anyone yet. I'm just speaking to a few producers. This idea of making a film about
Ah,
the impact that early childhood trauma, and especially boarding school, has had on our leaders and therefore on the world. And in your book, you talk about this idea that as we step into manhood and womanhood, important for us as a collective to demand our political leaders live in integrity.
mm,
And at the moment, I'm questioning how much our leaders are living in integrity.
boy.
And if you could speak to that, how we go about that, or about challenging that integrity, or I don't know, it's kind of feels that we're at a tipping point at the moment.
Yes. That's such a, again, such a mega question in terms of how the world leadership works, and who are the leaders really devoted to? What's the what's the trajectory? What's the rite of passage? What do they have to go through to be allowed to be in leadership roles? Do they, are they advanced by telling the clear truth, or are they advanced by learning to obfuscate the truth and do what their bosses demand and kind of sell their souls? Tough question. So I really support your doing that film. It's huge. It's such an important piece. Is how did the leaders get to be the way they were? And you've got that boarding school. That's not what you call it, I guess, but they that experience, which a lot of British men do. I know it's a pretty. I've heard it's a pretty painful experience. It's fairly horrible rite of passage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very for many people. For some, it's good. I think there was a writer who I had on my podcast was it last year? He said he did an article in the Guardian, and afterwards he said, please do write to me of your experience of boarding school. 800 people wrote to him. Only 11 were positive.
Whoa.
And that's like 1%.
Oh my.
And it's like, wow, that is incredible. And we think these, and that's kind of my passion, my real mission is that if I unpack the UK, so many of the business leaders, Richard Branson, boarding school, who runs Virgin, 30% of the Conservative Party, which runs the country, boarding school, 60% of our judges, boarding school. And we think if there's that 1% that liked it, but these guys are in charge. So I think it is. Yeah. I'm really passionate about that.
Good.
So kind of for us as men, integrity. I mean, how do we, is it important for us to have other men to challenge us to go, hey, wait a minute, are you really living in integrity?
What a miracle to actually have that in our lives, huh? To have somebody that'll actually, gently, lovingly call us out if we're not living in integrity. And just back to the boarding schools, I read someplace years ago that there was it was almost like structured abuse, where the upperclassmen would abuse the younger ones, and then they would abuse, and then they would graduate, and then they go around the world and abuse everybody else. So that became kind of the power technology of the whole British Empire. It sounds awful. So anything you can do to out that, and that little statistic that you just did about the 11 out of 800 men actually found it positive. Geez.
Yeah. Nick Duffel, who wrote the book, he's been on the podcast last year again. Robert Bly wrote kind of a bit about whatever they call it, not the preface, but a few words at the beginning of his book. And Nick Duffel says, he talks about this, that because we learned at boarding school to hate the inner indigenous, therefore we could go out into the world and kind of do what we did to the indigenous in everybody else. And we didn't do it often by force. It was often by shame. We shamed those people.
Oh yeah. Oh, just like they were shamed.
Yeah. So going back to integrity, then, do you feel it's important for us as men and maybe as women to kind of this friend to go, please call me out, in a nice way. If I say I'm going to do something, please hold me accountable to it.
Yeah, obviously we do that a great deal in MKP, accountability being one of our major skills that we learn and share with each other. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I mentioned a friend that I get together with every week, and and we can just riff with each other, because we've learned to trust each other so much. And every so often, one of my riffs will get just slightly out of integrity, and he's very, very gently kind of just invites me to look at that a little deeper. Just open that. Marvelous. Yeah, he helps guide in his own, not even with intention. It's just part of our sharing with each other. What a gift. So yeah, if you find friends that can guide you as you guide them, how beautiful.
Thank you. Integrity. Yeah. 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 Thank you. Yeah, I mean, next question was about play, but we've kind of touched on that. And the question I had was like, often men's work can be really serious. It's like, and because I do work with scouts, I've got a list of games. One of them is like group juggle.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
juggling around the circle, backwards
Awesome.
and forwards, trying to get these teenagers to do it. And so yeah, I mean, you've spoken it about, but are there any simple games? I mean, hey, I love learning new games. Can you teach me a game, Bill?
No, but I know that there's some of the integration groups around here. Every fourth week is play night, or they give it different names. Hangout night. Sometimes they go someplace together and do something, and sometimes they just gather around a fire and drink some beer and talk silly. But it's permission to just hang out and not have to do the usual structure, the inner work. I like that very much. I think it's a very wise way to go.
Yeah, thank you.
There's what that does also is it makes the social connections. I think sometimes they invite their partners, their women, wives and stuff, to come and be part of it. So that also grows the community. It as that bonding happens, that there's just more trust and more richness with the genders mixed. So again, there's intentionality. Just if one man's got the intention to do that,
Yeah,
bring it forward. Not
I'll,
that hard. Just do the invitation.
I'll take my bag of balls to the next NWTA and ask if anyone wants to play. And my Frisbee, maybe take my Frisbee.
Ooh, Frisbee. That's the other thing. I've got a Frisbee group where we've been together for 10 years, and every Thursday afternoon we play Frisbee, and we're all elders. We're all pushing 80. And so we call it geezer disc. I know, and we don't play. It's not ultimate. We're not running around. We're just playing catch. But for geezers, that's like just playing catch. You risk that throw, and then the other guy's got to run a little bit. So we've learned to do some beautiful throws. We've got in our geezer disc. We've got two rules. One is no diving.
Yeah.
Because you might hurt yourself. And the other one is no saying I'm sorry, which gives us permission to just try all kinds of different throws with each other. It's very joyous. Actually, we many times we'll make a catch or a throw that's just like, it's just brilliant. We bless each other. Oh, terrific catch. Oh my God, good work. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Geezer disc.
Yeah. For a while we had 7 or 8 guys playing, and you could kind of tell the essence of a man by how he plays Frisbee, and whether he's just looking to get blessing or whether he actually gives the blessing, whether he shares that same energy of acknowledging each other. It's a subtle, lovely thing. So there's a game that I love.
Yeah. Interesting. That's my favorite game with scouts, actually, is to play ultimate Frisbee with them. And I love that thing about the blessing is when they do something good, it's like, oh wow, I love that catch.
Yep.
Having that blessing in there. We sometimes used to play soccer, but that could be quite competitive, and it's kind of almost a bit too competitive. Whereas I found Frisbee is like, very playful and fun. So thank you. Yeah. Maybe I'll buy myself a Frisbee and take it down to Devon.
They have these special ones that have soft sides.
Yeah, I was going to say the aerobie ones. We've got them.
For us elders, having those soft side Frisbees makes it so much easier to catch without, without breaking fingers. So we've got the proper tools for the proper age for the proper game there.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a joy in my life.
Frisbee. Great. So another question I had, which came up, you talk about in the book, is conflict management. I see there's quite a lot of conflict in the world. And is there anything, maybe just on the micro level for us, whether it's in a men's group or with our partners, what's something, and you've done the work with community, what's really helped people in conflict management?
Yeah, I'm going to give you two things. One is it's a technique my wife and I use, and we've passed it on, which is some structure. Instead of just trying to communicate with interrupting each other, is to have some structure. We use a 2-minute timer. It's just a little thing that looks like that. In fact, this is the one we use. We used it yesterday. And we set it for 2 minutes, and then she'll talk for 2 minutes, and then when it clicks done, then it's my turn. 2 minutes until it dings, and then it's her turn. And that allows us to do really listen to each other, and we do active listening within that. If she says something that I need to reflect back to make sure that she knows that I heard it, I'll reflect. I heard you say, and then I'll say something. And in 2 minutes we change back and forth. And there's something about just having that unbelievably simple structure that slows the whole process down and actually brings forward healthy listening. And the group dynamic, we developed a thing we call the conflict transformation process, which, if it's done with good hearts, can actually be a growth experience, because it's kind of like the warrior, what do we call it? Clearing process is about sharing data and then sharing the emotional stuff that comes from the experience, and then translating that. And so the translation of it is a form of that reminds me of. So we're doing a little shadow search in the process of doing that conflict resolution or conflict transformation. And if that's done properly with good hearts and lots of support, people can actually learn something about themselves as how they got themselves into this conflict, out of some shadow that they didn't know was there. And again, it's slowing the whole process down sufficiently to learn get that little piece of awareness about, who I am, or what happened to me that made me act out in this way. So.
Thank you. So I'm hearing some structure, so a timer, 2-minute timer. One person talks, the other person, and you have some active listening in that. And then also the group dynamic, this conflict transformation.
Yeah. When two people in the group have an issue, they handle it offline, usually with a facilitator. They'll choose somebody else in the group to guide the process, to make sure that they kind of stay with the structure so that it really works, and to support them in that. We found that actually works really well.
And is that in the most recent book, the community book, or is that in the mentor?
Yeah. There's a version of it in there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one that's been evolving quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because the nonviolent communication, the NVC, Marshall Rosenberg's model, has been unbelievably powerful and valuable. So we borrowed some of the things from that, some of the active listening steps. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's really useful. I was involved in something last year, and it's like there was a bit of conflict, and we tried the clearing and it didn't quite work. There was resistance on one person's side. So it's like, what other things can we use here? If someone, because I think if we've got someone who's willing to look at their stuff what's that within me? I guess what I've struggled with is when the person is not willing there, it's all about the other person. And then I found that quite hard to resolve as a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you can suggest in that? If someone who has a conflict in a group?
Those processes are usually designed to go both ways.
Both ways.
So I'll if it's if it's me that I'm calling for it, then I get to look at my stuff. But then when I've done that, as best as I can, I look at whatever shadow is up for me in this dynamic. Then I invite the other to go through the same process and look at whatever shadow is up for him or her in this process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, boy, my experience is it generally flushes out the shadows fairly quickly. Yeah, if somebody won't participate, simply won't step into that structure, they may be letting everybody know that they really don't belong in that group.
Mm-hmm.
It requires a certain amount of goodwill, and if that's not there, for whatever reason, whatever wounds are up for that person, they may have to find another place to be. It's very hard. I've watched groups, deal with, really incorrigible characters, and boy, just suffer for months until that one leaves. It's very hard. No simple solutions there.
No, I guess it's like a perfect learning, because it's like challenging.
Yeah.
Mm.
And the groups are, this has been part of my delight is the integration groups are formed by whoever shows up for the weekend geographically as best as we can. Those 5 men or 10 men become the integration group for that geographical area. And they're basically strangers.
Yeah.
And within X amount of months, they're best friends, because we're so lonely that here's the thing, like damn near any structure that brings the men together in a safe way, they'll open their hearts with each other and they'll discover, oh my God, I love these guys. I've never had friends like this. We've seen that happen thousands of times.
Yeah, I really can relate. There was one man in my group who I was struggling with. I did a clearing, and it was like, oh yeah, it's all about me. And when I did that, tears came, and it's like I get on really beautifully with him now. And it's like, oh yeah, thank you. And yet most of the time in many walks of life, we have these charges with people, but we never have the chance to actually work through them. And so, yeah, I've found that tremendously healing. So,
yep. Men by and large just blow each other off. You piss me off, don't ever want to talk to you again. And there's times when that's appropriate too. It's like sometimes you actually have to make the cut and end the relationship, but not precipitously, not without giving it a good shot up front.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. So we're kind of coming up to about 50 minutes, I think, at the moment we've been on. I've got a couple more kind of questions here.
Okay, this has been fun. Let's take another one. Then we'll end.
Yeah. So I guess the final one, I guess, is to do with in your book you talk about Helen Caldicott and her work in bringing awareness about the current challenges with the environment. And I guess my last question is really, as an elder, what do you feel we can do individually to really start creating a thriving future? Don't mean on ending on a difficult question. I just was reading that a few days ago, and I'm like, oh yeah, I really feel that's present. I speak to so many people at the moment who are going, oh, this is chaos. What do we do? I just give up. And I'm like,
so that's
keep going.
That's gonna bring us back to mission again, which is perfect. Good place to end. That Helen Caldicott is a physician from Australia who was talking about the medical consequences of nuclear war. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when the nuke issues are up again. I hate to say that, but that was real significant back then. And as one of my call moments, there was a friend of mine that said, you have to listen to Helen. And there was a video of her at some conference, some humanistic conference. And I'm standing in the back just because I trusted this friend. I'm standing in the back, my arms folded. Okay, talk to me. So Helen Caldecott is sharing this data about the medical consequences. Next thing you know, the tears are streaming down my face. I went, oh, geez. Okay, I'm in. I get it. And then the more I studied nuclear situation, I realized it was pretty much men that were causing that horror to exist in our world. And I also had enough psychological training and stuff in graduate school and all the seminars I did to know that hurt people, scared people do whatever they need to protect. And so building all those nukes was probably scared men trying to protect themselves in some odd way that nobody ever was able to unearth, because they got all kinds of cognitive ways of defending it. But so that was where my original mission came in, which was I create a safe planet through empowering men. So that was the mission that lived in me when we created this thing in '84. And subsequently, largely from Charles Eisenstein, learning that we all have a gift. And as best as we can, we humans really need to live into our gift. And I talked to you about my trajectory of living into my bliss, into my joy. That was living into my gift. That was living into what really lights me up, what really gives me joy. And I see the world being so kind of forced and mechanized that very, very few of us, have been able to live our gift. From reading your biography, I know that you made some very difficult life choices along the way to live into your gift, to live into your bliss. And so that's become my current mission, is to help people live into live from their gift, just to live into their joy. And so that's my mission. That's my current mission. So I guess I would even the incredible chaos and misinformation, disinformation, and all of the craziness of this COVID time that's just shut down so much, and it's opened up so much for us to see how the world actually works. I'd invite people to go into their hearts and find what gives them joy, and trust that the mission will bubble out of that, and at some point you'll be able to articulate it. And it's very different for everybody. Sometimes it's just what seems like tiny stuff, and sometimes it's grandiose stuff, and it doesn't matter as long as we're living into it from our hearts. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. Yeah. Beautiful. I love that. Moving into our gift and our bliss. Thank you. So how do people learn more about you, your books? Do you have a website I can direct people to or do people just go to, if someone wants to get your book, best place, is that Amazon or is it your book publisher?
Yeah, it's been on Amazon for a very long time. Yeah, it's a self-pub. It originally was published by a big New York publishing house, but then after it was sold for 15 years, which is a miracle. And then and then I got my rights back, and I've self-published it now with that new 30 pages on MKP history, which I had a really good time writing. There's some fun stories in there, which I guess you read.
Yeah, really great stories.
Yeah, for $20 you can get it from Amazon, and there's part of me that hates supporting Amazon, but it's the only place it's available.
Okay. Well, I'll put a link in to the US and the UK link to buy his book on. Okay.
I actually get, it's called Kindle now. It's a subset of Amazon. You publish through Kindle. And I get my little reports once a month on the books that are sold. There'll often be, a dozen from the US and 3 from England. I go, oh my God, UK selling my book.
Great. I'll put that into the description then, the how
Okay.
to get to your books. But yeah, thank you. I really appreciate for all the work you've done over, I guess that's almost 40 years with the Mankind Project, the
Almost.
NWTA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pierce. It's been really fun. I really appreciate you also. I appreciate knowing you and your trajectory, how you got from there to here, and what you're doing in the world with these interviews.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing what you do.
Yeah, a pleasure. A pleasure. Okay, I'll press stop. So take care. Bye-bye.